Hi, afternoon, everyone. I'm Patrick. Thanks for joining us. Given that we are running a little bit short of time, I'll speed it up a little bit. Let me introduce my panel of speakers in terms of alphabetical order, right? So let's start with Ambuj. All right, Ambuj, please come. All right, Ambuj has more than 19 years of experience with AstraZeneca, and he has global exposure in digital transformation and healthcare, right? So later on, we'll also ask him different questions for him to share about his leadership experience, not just with AstraZeneca, but over in Amazon, Abbott, Medtronic, Sanofi, many more. All right. Next, I want to welcome Charles from Boston Scientific. All right. Charles is IT director, and he was one of the co-founders of the Center of Excellence for Digital Tech Strategy as well. Thanks. All right, Julian from Roche Diagnostics. Yeah, thanks for joining us. One interesting fact about Julian is that he has more than 36 years of experience with 10 years as a practicing doctor. Yeah, right. And Martin. So Martin is the co-founder and CEO of Theia Health. All right. And he developed a MedClarity, an AI-powered cardiac CT analysis platform. And actually, he has a booth here in the innovation zone as well. So later, when you have the time, please drop by. And last but not least, Mukkesh from A-Star. Well, we need all the different players, right? Not just from the public and the private sector, but someone who looks after the national level type of population data and so on. Thank you. Right. Okay. So as Jim mentioned earlier on, the question is AI, friend, foe, or frenemy? Yeah. I'm not going to answer the question. The panelists here will answer the question for you. But before AI can be anything, right? You actually need the data, right? Yeah. And the thing about, we heard from this morning's session as well, data actually is the ultimate frenemy, right? Because data is so priceless and it's so fiercely guarded. Yeah. So maybe my first question is to Mukkesh, since from your vantage point at A-Star, you see the things at the national level. You see the challenges that you face, and you know that there are data silos between different institutions. Yeah. And those are the biggest foe when it comes to AI, right? Yeah. So what are the incentive mechanisms or the governance structure that you need to put in place in order to turn data sharing into something that becomes a kind of a necessary frenemy, so to speak? Yeah. Something that probably the players here, the institutions, the partners will in a way have to participate in. Maybe you can elaborate more on that, Mukkesh.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, like Patrick said, I think data is a new oil, right? We all know that data is essential for training our AI models and having the best state-of-the-art models. Well, we know that there are challenges in terms of accessing data, especially some of the more sensitive patient data, right? Trust, for example, I put in place some mechanisms in how these data sets can be accessed. So I think broadly is about enabling the ecosystem with having access to these data sets. And when you do that, how do you do that in a manner that will let people know that the data sets are safe and the people get attributed? I think at the heart of it, there's a lot of attribution issues. We do see that. We hear that a lot as well. People have concerns about, if my data is put in that platform, how will it be used? Who will get credited? Things like that. So I think a lot of times it's the governance layer, assuring people that their data is safe and that it has the right governance layers to protect it and attribute the right players who are contributing the data as well.
Right. So yeah, I think in terms of data attribution, and definitely that's one particular area, especially A-Star as an agency, right? You get to shape a lot of that initiative and policies. Right. Maybe next question probably to Martin. Yeah. So Martin, as a health tech founder, kind of a serial founder, can I say? Yeah. You need that data, right? Yeah. And in order to build an AI company from public research, in a way you live in that frenemy world where you need that data. how do you navigate that tension, yeah, between the academic need for open science but the need to commercialize it as well, right? In order to, well, in one way, you want to develop your own proprietary IP to be successful and thrive.
I think this is a quite challenging question. Without science, we won't be have a company because we are spun off from Health, NUH, Diagnostics, the science projects. But when we have the data, we spun off, we have the data, how we can benefit back to the science. Actually, most of the time, we can find a win-win situation. I give a very real examples. We are doing the AI for cardiac scans. When the patient done the scan, we'll give a percentile. That means based on your score, what kind of risk factors percent in your this age. But the reference, currently most of the hospital using are reference created in US nearly 20 years ago, and based on mostly Western people cohorts. So we are building a more local cohort targeted to Asian cohorts. So I think that kind of reference may help in a lot, and we also share this kind of percentile to the science so that everyone can use, not just us. I think that's one of the examples the data can be a very friendly way on commercial and benefit to the science.
All right, thanks for that. Maybe let's take it one step further, right? Julian, you work a lot with the hospitals, obviously, at Roche Diagnostics, and you also work with a lot of customers in the hospital sector where they wish to analyze a lot of the data. How do you manage that dynamics inside the hospital where the lab wants efficiency, right, leveraging AI and so on, but the clinician actually wants transparency, the explainability, as was highlighted earlier this morning, right? Because without that, it's like a black box, right? How do you manage all those things?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I think for us in Roche Diagnostics, like you pointed out, laboratory diagnostics, doing the tests, the samples, pathology, tumor samples is one aspect. What we do in that space is really helping our customers do throughput and efficiency and minimizing the amount of duplications or failure of tests. So from that point of view, a lot of that is machine learning. On the clinician side, as per my other colleagues here on this panel, we're a very highly regulated industry. So much of what we put into the industry has to be approved by your HSA, your TGA, your MFDS. So from that perspective, much of what we do with those results, much of that clinical insight we give to the doctors, much of actually the technologies and the offerings we give to remote patient monitoring at home, all of that has to be approved by the regulator. And in order to do that, the data that we use for that is not the ones that we do at the hospital, but we have to do the clinical trials, the evidence base, not only in the country that maybe we developed that technology, but every country we go to where we wish to deploy that country may require for that product to be regulatory approved. We often work with our customers, key opinion leaders, to actually develop data sets that allow us to prove that, take it to the regulator, demonstrate that it works, and then that addresses the clinical aspect of, is this a black box, or can I have confidence that you've taken this through our country's regulators and proven that this works? So that's the position that we're in, is that we will work with the clinicians, we'll work with the academic centers to get the evidence to prove that this works in their space. Thank you.
All right. So can I maybe a follow-up question there, right, Julian? So you mentioned about that regulatory hurdle that you have to go through. So typically in that kind of space, right, what do you see as the potential opportunity there in terms of the ecosystem collaborators here? How can they actually help you to expedite that whole process itself? It's not in my scripted question, so hopefully you can take that.
Great question. Thank you for that. So As Roche, we in the diagnostic space, we actually collaborate with many people in the ecosystem, whether that's in innovation for bioassays, future bioassays, or in the digital space with machine learning, AI, or even large language models. Part of our remit there with our partners is understanding where their starting point is, whether they're a commercial entity, whether they're an academic medical center, maybe it's actually even A-Star, for example, here in Singapore. Part of the work that we will do with them is to understand where their starting point is, the gap between what they start with and the due diligence, and then how that might be taken to a regulator. For us, we have a very industrial and well and tested regulatory approval mechanism. And that's how we in each individual country can make sure we understand what those do. Now to the audience that maybe want to kind of understand how do we collaborate or partner with Roche, first thing would be, is the product or offering that you have something that actually addresses a significant clinical need, a disease, a condition, or rare disease, or something else that actually it's novel, no one else has done it before. And then it's a case of getting in contact, and then we'll assess that together.
Thank you. All right. So, just now we talked a lot about data sharing. Yeah. Let's move on a little bit into the core of the actual problem here when we talk about AI. In all of this, the main thing when it comes to AI, whether it's going to be the foe, the friend, or the frenemy, is actually the human element, right? Having the perfect data or even having brilliant algorithms. What happens when this friend, this AI friend or this AI foe actually meets, say, the sales representative or the patient or the physician? Yeah. So next question to you, Charles. All right. You come from a very competitive medtech space. Yeah. And I understand that you also do a lot of work where you embed AI into digital solutions that you use to empower your sales representatives. But that basically amplifies the risk, right? So now with assuming, I'm just saying, assuming that your AI algorithm comes out with a negative outcome due to bias or hallucination and so on, how do you manage the ambiguity of liability? Do you blame the sales rep or is it the platform? So does this change AI to become your legal foe then?
Well, I think that's a very important question, and that kept me awake at the night for the past 2 years, and I think it's going to continue to keep me awake in the next 2 years as well. So I think in the medtech industry or even healthcare industry, when you try to introduce AI into the digital solutions servicing our sales rep and physician, I think we are not dealing only with the technology. We are actually dealing with the people, and then we are dealing with the responsibility and outcome. Basically, that's a tricky point that we consider. Technology by now is quite mature, okay? And I think, what do I want to say is that overall, when we go into the technology, we are looking at, actually it's a very good question. Okay, let me put it this way. So when we design the technology, we need to define very clearly exactly what the AI is going to service. For example, okay, we need to involve our legal and compliance and business people that at the beginning starting point. Okay, and so that it's not building the technology, but it's building the trust. Everybody knows that exactly what AI is doing, and actually more important, what AI doesn't do. Because AI do something that it doesn't do, then that becomes important, and that becomes the fault that you're talking about, right? Second thing is that I want to make it very clear is that in our AI, we do not replace the clinical decision making. That's very important, because AI here is nothing but we are providing the better insight to help our physician to make the faster and more efficient decision. Because the aim is that when physician making decision, it normally will take a long time, such as reading the ultrasound. Okay, that will take some time. But if we can help them to make decision faster, then the operation hour will be shorter. The risk that patient is having is shorter as well. Okay, but the key over here is that we are not putting the decision making by the AI. AI is not making decision for doctors and not making decision for patient. It's just supporting role. So I use the analogy like it's a GPS that you are using in the car, right? GPS will tell you the direction, tell the destiny, but ultimately the driver is responsible for that. And this is very similar to our sales rep in the industry as well. They are there not to make the medical advice. They are not a medical advisor. They are there to provide the right information and solution to the physician that we have. Right? So long story short, when we put the AI there, if AI is being misused, okay, or misunderstood, that becomes a problem. Okay, and that becomes the risk that we are doing. And therefore, we need to be constantly asking ourselves, saying what should be the right thing to do, what should be the right compliance we need to follow, so that we can get the exciting AI solution, but lower the risk. Okay, ultimately, we want to use AI to drive the physician better education, and then they can treat the patient better for the better patient outcome. I think that's what our industry is looking for. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Charles. All right, and moving on to Ambuj, right? I guess in pharma, you face a very similar kind of commercial hurdle, right? Especially when you leverage AI solutions. You might have AI friends, so-called, that powers your similar digital health solutions. And like what Charles mentioned, well, the idea is to help you to increase the scale and the speed of your development, right? Yeah, but when you try to actually get your digital health solutions adopted in the market, what kind of challenges do you actually face?
Right, that's a good question, right? But I would want us to take a step back and understand, answer a larger question, right? Where is AI being utilized in the pharma world, right? So essentially 4 applications to it. Employee productivity, Gen AIs of the world, we all know about it, right? Have an enterprise version of GPT, co-pilots of the world, that's one. Sales rep productivity. I speak about it separate from the employee because sales reps are the most precious commodity of ours, right? Third one, diagnostics, pre-screening, early screening, right? 2 parts to it. One is in-clinic diagnostics, what you can do within the existing set, and one is in laboratory diagnostics, which likes of Roche Diagnostics power. So there is a role for AI there as well. And the last one is AI in R&D, where you talk about AI being able to work through data sets and potentially come up with new molecules, new therapies, et cetera, right? I would address except the R&D piece, I can address everything else because I represent the commercial arm. So now zooming back, right, the question is always, what is the right level of risk, awareness or averseness, right? In technology, the classic saying is, I will say sorry rather than ask for permission, right? Now, think of that and think of how we operate in healthcare, exactly the opposite, right? We deal in lives, patients' health, and we cannot have that situation. However, what also remains to be true, right, that existing processes, either complemented by the current set of technology, people are as prone to issues as is AI, right? So then we talk about the concept of human in the loop, which is any input you give needs to be validated by a human, and any output which is then sent to, let's say, the end consumers, the patients, or the HCPs needs to be validated as well, right? With that, I think there is a broad equivalence you can get in terms of AI or technology risk awareness or aversion, right? The second piece of it, right, how this manifests in decision making is, especially in countries, right, which are further along in their journey of being AI aware, data aware, is a lack of, moving forward. For example, right, there's a joke in Singapore. We have more pilots going on in the healthcare space than we have pilots in SIA, right? We have pilots, but very less of them actually get implemented. As opposed to, very recently, AstraZeneca Thailand has been working with the government there, and they have within their standard of care included AI chest X-rays for detection of lung nodules, right? So that has already happened. So the wake-up call here is probably towards, developed economies, developed systems, which are which are stuck in a loop because of the risk aversion and not taking the decision. Right. The third aspect of how this works out is what can clinicians do, right? So typically, the way we think about it is that healthcare companies own the data and we are the ones who will make it available. That's not the case. We only get the data for a specific period of time, for specific attributes, for specific results. And when that is done, the data is no longer with us, right? So the onus falls back on hospitals, clinicians to make this work. Perhaps the final one, and I know I'm giving a very long answer, is when you do innovation, eventually who pays for it? Is it the patients? Is it the insurance systems? Is it the government? What is it, right? We have also not figured out a model on that, because even though, let's say, a lung X-ray AI solution like Cure shows 96% accuracy rates, we are still stuck on that 4% not working, which is far better than, let's say, a radiologist, just working without a solution. So I hope that gives a comprehensive, view to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'll stay on with you, Ambuj, afterwards. Yeah. So, we've kind of covered the data foundation, the integration into so-called the market itself, right? Let's take it, like what you say, from the helicopter view, 30,000 feet above, right? Yeah. I think this is where the Frenemy dynamics really truly comes alive, right? Like what you say, in the marketplace itself. Yeah. So from a market dynamics perspective, you kind of have given that answer already. Yeah. You say big pharma often partners with AI startups, probably like players like Martin's, Theia Health, and so on. Yeah. That's the classic Frenemy relationship. Yeah. So how does global leaders like AstraZeneca ensure that the partnership is truly collaborative rather than, becoming a foe where you dictate the terms, you control the data, and basically you decide, how to run the commercials?
Right. So I think I've touched upon the data aspect of it, which is very clearly the data ownership does not, unlike the belief, it does not really lie with the companies in question, right? Now the second piece of it, which sort of covers it all, is the partnership model we go for, right? So what's in it for us? Let's start there, right? So AstraZeneca, years ago, we realized that if we are to make the kind of change we want in the health of patients, we need to not only work on therapies, we need to sort of empower the ecosystem as well. How does the ecosystem get empowered? Ecosystem gets empowered where standard of care, standard of diagnostics is well defined, which it is. However, the threshold of pre-screening, the accessibility, the cost is lower, right? And a few years ago, we realized that AI, although Gen AI was not the name of the game there, but AI could help it, right? So we consciously came up with this concept where we would scout for and partner with AI companies, typically in the diagnostics pre-screening space. And the key word here is we'll partner with them, but we do not take a stake in them. We do not typically own the IP unless the IP leads to, let's say, a drug discovery or something. That's a different question. We do not own the IP. We ensure that we use our goodwill with the healthcare partners, right? With governments, with private and public healthcare players, and we connect these scale-ups or startups to those systems. Further to that, if we ascertain then they are who they say they are, which is essentially AI governance, all the checks and balances once they are done, we would then go to the extent of funding certain studies to figure out the efficacy of their solutions, right? I'll fall back on Cure, right? Cure AI was a relatively unknown startup about 4-5 years ago. And in April this year, they did 5 million lung scans, lung X-ray scans using their AI technology, right? It doesn't stop there. Now they're working towards detection of tuberculosis, COPD, so on and so forth, right? Our intent is not to stifle growth, but empower them, because a lot of times these startups do not have the kind of relationships an old school pharma company would. So that's the entirety of how we work with them. So I don't really see a frenemy sort of relationship. I see a very complementary role, right? Because we are not in diagnostics space, right? But we are in the space of making patients better, curing patients, right? The earlier detection there is, the earlier staging we get the patient at, we can be sure of better outcomes. So we look at it from that perspective, and that's working out well for us.
Thank you. Right. So I can see Martin shifting a little bit in his seat, right? So maybe I'll give the next question to Martin, right? With what Ambuj say in terms of how they encourage the partnership and make things happen in the commercial world. What's your opinion on that, right? That's my first question. And my second question to you, Martin, is what do you think is the biggest foe that can potentially threaten to, kill your promising startup?
Another challenge questions. Yes, I think for when I was starting an entrepreneurship journey, I'm quite scared of giant companies. They took over your business. And after I co-found a company with few thousand of employees, I know how much limitations a big company has. There's a lot limitation than a startup to entering of different directions and use of resource. So I think we should not, as a startup, we should not afraid of big players in the market. Actually, the use of resource internally within them maybe it's more expensive than getting a resource from outside. And there's a lot of limitations within that. And yet to be a good partner with a company like that, you'll be very helpful for both parties, frankly speaking, because they can't be diverse their focus in their mainstream of business. So with the partnership with a startup, smaller company to complementary each other, actually it's a much of win-win situation. I think there's provide the best value for both parties rather than just eat you out on your directions, because all the internal existing resource routine in the big company actually there's already have momentums in the marketing in many of directions. To turn that momentum in any of other direction will be like huge cost and huge risk as well. So I think that as a startup, the most important is that to really assure the value of your new startup and whether you are really have real value. If you have real value and find out more bigger player as a partner will be the best form of to grow the business. For example, like us, we always partner with the top trained hospitals, famous hospitals, and of the top of funds managers or of the biggest of the retailer or these distributors. And we also open up our software for them to trial. And also we are setting the challenge on their data set to bring over and take all kinds of analysis. So I think that's because you are very confident on the value you have and partner with bigger player have a much bigger platform will start to grow. That's my view. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So my next question is to both Charles and Julian, right? Maybe you all can take it one after the other. Yeah. So, understanding the relationship here, yeah, it's not just about large established big pharma or medtech companies and so on, right? I'm sure there are internal challenges, right, that you need to manage within your organization, right? So when you have a new innovative AI-driven solution, yeah, whether it's for your sales reps or for your diagnostic tools and so on, how do you manage that competition for resources, yeah, for market share, without so-called affecting your legacy solutions and products?
So probably I can go first is that I don't think that in our company, okay, or Boston Scientific, we will have major challenge in terms of innovation through the AI. So we did apply AI in some of the product in the market, and that did help us to gain the market share much more. Our biggest challenge is really at how do we know that the AI we invested come back with the value? Okay, and just now I also talk about what is the legal compliance, okay, over there. So we spend a lot of time actually on the organization change. Okay, that is from internal perspective, how to work with AI, right? So basically, you need to go with education, sympathy, and also the embassy over there. So that takes some time. On top of that, actually, we introduced a new AI into our product, and we launched it last year as well. And that is where, how can we educate our physician to work with AI as well? So we have several kind of physicians that one of them say, okay, AI doesn't know better than me. I know better. But again, just now I commented, AI is not here to make the decision for you. It's like a GPS. You may know the route, but it tells you what is the upcoming, what is the so-called road condition there. So same thing when we put the needle into the body in the medical device, anything can happen. Some of the blockages happen there, and how do you deal with it? And watch out. So that helps physician to make the decision much faster, okay, and reduce the risk of the operation. But some physicians still saying, okay, I will know better, how do I do it? But for the younger physician, their acceptance become faster, okay, because they're in the learning. So how do we balance that become important, right? So that's why in pharma world, probably we look at that, how can we gain the market share? For the medical device world, we focus more on how can we educate physicians so that they can treatment better. So the angle comes in a bit different. But the more we can educate physicians to use AI with us, our product, surely I think market share will come in. Yeah, so that's where we are driving that adoption.
Julian?
Maybe I'll approach this from a different direction. I mean, ultimately, our customers, labs, clinicians, patients at home, they face all the same challenges in this region as in the rest of the world in terms of chronic diseases, physician shortages and staff burnout, and then the demand for precision medicine. So from that point of view, much of what we do in Roche, both diagnostics and also from the pharmaceuticals side of the business, is how do we help those customers with the burden on them currently, the tools that we provide from a diagnostics perspective, which are ultimately laboratory tests. How can we help them with reviewing those, augmenting and optimizing the review of those in terms of speeding up the time to diagnosis, speeding up the time to treatment, speeding up hopefully clinical outcomes and improving clinical outcomes. So for us in Roche, even though we're an almost 130-year-old company, our intent is by 2030, we want to be one of the leading digital life sciences companies in the world. And part of that is within our own organizations, putting into place education around the benefits of AI and digital technologies, helping craft what those value benefits to the physicians are, both in terms of time saving, focusing their efforts on what the patients to look out for, which tests are available and which are the most accurate, what is the next kind of etiology in the precision medicine space, genomics, sequencing, as a means of then giving the customers the best tools, whether it's the provider, the laboratory, or the patient, that then gives them the shortest route to interpreting the result and then taking the next step of action. So for us, with the AI journey, our own organization actually embracing it. It's a journey. We do take some of the tools around workflow efficiency internally, but we're also changing the dynamics with our customers and talking about, we already know you are doing stuff in AI. How can we better support you on that journey? What tools are you looking for? So we're not the pioneers, we're just fast followers. Our customers are the ones that are demanding what they want from us. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. All right, maybe now come back to Mukkesh, right? Yeah, so you have heard from the different speakers here about the commercial, the clinical, the startup challenges, right? So again, from the national level, from A-Star's perspective, I understand that you also explore new technology like leveraging Gen AI to create synthetic data. Yeah, and do you think this will become the ultimate friend that will actually solve the data sharing problem that you talked about earlier on? Yeah, and it will address all the privacy concerns. Yeah, that's my first question. My second question is that, and do you think will that actually improve the collaboration here with the different players, or will it actually threaten the core principles of data validation, the data stewardships, that I'm sure is very important from your perspective?
Thanks, Patrick. I liked how Martin said about the value that a startup brings, right, to the ecosystem. I think that's very important. For A-Star, we are working with partners in the ecosystem locally and globally. And an example I can give is DataCibo. It's actually a US startup. We work with them on synthetic data generation. So they've got AI algorithms that are open sourced, and we use these algorithms to actually generate synthetic data. And right now, we are doing evaluations with that synthetic data to see how close they can come to a real data when it comes to LLM training or ML training. So we see the values of startup and how they can enable the ecosystem. And as always, right, I think we will come together, right, whether it's startup or the big techs, to actually enable such technologies. And ultimately, I think it's a joint solution that we are working towards, right? Another example will be OpenAI. We've also been working with OpenAI on some of the LLM benchmarking. And we do see that there's a value again, right? We do this benchmarking, we put it into the public domain, whether it's a paper or a white paper, and ultimately it helps again the general ecosystem to know, okay, for this particular task, this model is good for that. So I'll go for this model. So I think that's a very strong effect when you put all of these technologies from the ecosystem together. And the part about synthetic data, it's one of the technology I'll say is a starting point. There are other technologies as well, like confidential compute, right, and encryptions. We talked about also, secure sandboxes where there are even blockchain technologies that enable some of these privacy-preserving tools. I was just having some conversations earlier, and they are in the startup phase, in the initial phase. They're not yet fully fledged solutions. So I think there's also an angle of education about these technologies, broader level, to know what these systems are capable of and where there are limitations. They are not perfect. For synthetic data, for example, we saw that there could be still a gap of about 10% when it comes to LLM accuracy when you train with synthetic data. So it's not entirely representative. You will still see some level of shift in terms of statistics, right? But what level can you tolerate them? Am I okay to deal with slight shifts and still retain the overall statistical probability good enough for first level cut? In fact, that could be a way to reduce your data governance or the sort of strictness, right, in terms of accessing data. Synthetic data could be a first level cut, right? I sort of use that data to explore a bit, and I'm confident with the results. Then I ask for the real data, and then that perhaps goes through a more stricter governance. But so we see that as a way to enable data access and sharing with synthetic data. But ultimately, you need validation, right? How much can I trust? And I think there needs to be more work done there broadly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I add on. Actually, we work very closely with A-Star, various departments like BII, I2R, DST. So we have frequent communication with the scientists in A-Star, and there's a huge of data has been accumulated along the years, and there's a lot of outputs. Yeah. So this output may not really need a data, but they can benefit the staff like us because already train the model, train the matrix, train the whatever. So it's like I think the way to share, because when your project come out, we also bring in new data to the pool. So it's a beneficial win-win situation between the staff and the ASA. Thanks.
Thanks, Martin and Mukkesh. Right. Do we still have time? Okay. Probably not. Okay. But thanks for all the panelists, right, for your sharings in your insights into the challenges as well as the opportunities. Yeah. So, you know, as you have heard from the panelists here, right, AI is not just a simple friend or a foe or a frenemy, right? Yeah. And I think Charles and a number of you also mentioned, we cannot just rely on the technology alone, right? Because ultimately, there's that human in the loop, right? Which is very important as a safeguard in terms of how we do all this. And earlier on, I also heard about the need to have the empathy, right? Because at the end, the benefit is for the patient, yeah. And so, of course, there's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, we heard about the different challenges in terms of getting data sharing, you know, and as Mukkesh mentioned about synthetic data being now just the first layer, and you know, there's a lot of pilots going on as well, right? And I'm sure all this will continue. Yeah. So I guess to conclude, right, AI for sure is here to stay. Yeah, it's about how we manage the different speed of a startup versus the big players, right? How we can bring everyone together in a really truly ecosystem way of working. Yeah, and it's about the open research that A-Star is working on versus things to manage the privacy risk. Yeah, so I hope that all of you got some nuggets of wisdom from our panelists here. And with that, I would like to just wrap up. And thank you to all the panelists again. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. Right, so just one last thing before we walk off the stage. I think as leaders here that you see here, you know, it's important to continue to have such difficult conversations. Sometimes we just keep a lot of things to ourselves, yeah. But it's important to get all the players here, yeah, to exchange ideas so that we can continue our collaboration. Thank you very much. And once again, thanks to all the panelists.